Hi, I'm Skinny Cheeks. This video will be covering all of the new sets for the Update 32 Deadlands DLC. We'll go through the crafted sets, Overland sets, the 3 new Mythics, talk about what they do and give some feedback over them and where they might be useful. I will have a separate video coming after the Week 3 PTS update that covers a lot of the other changes, including the hybrid stats added to the existing sets, the new cap on crit damage, and some of the other important info to know for the Deadlands DLC. Usually Week 3 of the PTS has a lot of the big changes, so since we are pretty close to it, I'll hold off on that summary video until then. So first off with the crafted sets, we have Wretched Vitality. This is Magicka Recovery, Stamina Recovery, Weapon and Spell Damage, and then while in combat, applying a major buff or debuff to a target grants you 260 Magicka and Stamina Recovery for 15 seconds. And then while in combat, applying a minor buff or debuff to a target grants you 130 Magicka and Stamina Recovery for 15 seconds. So if you are going for a recovery set, this one does it well, especially if you already have the major and minor buffs put into your setup and aren't changing anything around in your playstyle to get both of these to trigger. It is a decent bit more recovery overall than something like Amber Plasm, but it only works in combat and requires you to keep it up. Easy triggers and long durations though, so if recovery is a route you want to go, this should be very nice. For PvE uses though, not really seeing this fit anywhere in my opinion. Next up we have Deadlands Demolisher. This gives stamina, weapon and spell damage, stamina, and then your bash attacks deal 935 more damage. When you bash, you also deal 280 physical damage in a cone in front of you, interrupting any enemy's hit. This effect can occur once every 2 seconds and counts as bash damage. The set is a bit niche and I think probably designed with the Necro ultimate in mind, the pummeling Goliath morph that gives you the AoE bash attack. The 280 physical damage does look a bit low, but when I took this screenshot, I was only at about 12,500 resistances and the damage does scale up with higher resistances. So it did go up to 414 when I activated Major Resolve, which put me at about 18,500 resistances. And I'm not sure exactly how it scales up, but if that trend continued at 35k resistances, you'd have a tooltip somewhere around 800 physical damage in a cone. Might not seem like a ton, but stacking with a lot of other sources, it might start to get pretty strong. Not really a playstyle that I participate in, but it might be a fun set for those that do. And then finally for the craftable sets, we have Iron Flask. This gives max health, armor, and then when you drink a potion while in combat, reduce your damage taken by 12% for 20 seconds. So this is pretty much the reverse of Clever Alchemist. Same duration, same proc condition, but you get armor on the 4-piece bonus instead of weapon and spell damage, and you get damage mitigation when you drink your potion instead of more weapon and spell damage. Seems pretty strong to me, and it is a unique buff, so it will stack with other percent mitigation sources like major and minor protection. Could be especially good combined with potion cooldown glyphs, as you could get a really high uptime on it. Maybe a counter to some of the really hard hitting sections in 12-person trials for tanks. I don't know, might have some better options there, but this definitely looks like an interesting set. Probably my favorite of the 3 new craftable sets. Alright, on to the Overland sets. First up we have the light set, Eye of the Grasp. This adds Magicka, weapon and spell damage, crit chance, and then when you deal crit damage, generate 7 ultimate. This effect can occur once every 5 seconds. I would like if the 2-piece was something a little different so that it was exactly even for both mag and stam builds, but nonetheless still seems like a pretty good ult gen set. If you proc it on cooldown, you'd get 1.4 ult per second with this, which is pretty good. Minor Heroism, for example, is 1 ult every 1.5 seconds or 2/3 of an ult per second on average. And then Major Heroism is 3 ult every 1.5 seconds or 2 ult per second on average. So this is kind of in between those two as far as effectiveness. It does require the critical strike to activate it though, so it won't continue building if you aren't having continuous damage output. So nothing too crazy here, but it might sneak its way into some setups. Next up we have Hexos's Ward. This is a medium set. It adds crit chance, weapon and spell damage, and crit chance, and then the 5-piece is dealing crit damage with a direct damage ability, grants you a damage shield that absorbs 12,265 damage for 6 seconds. This effect can occur once every 6 seconds. This reminds me a lot of Iceheart, except without the ice damage output. The shield is a good bit larger though, and it's a guaranteed proc instead of the percent chance you'd get from Iceheart, but you are also giving up a 5-piece bonus instead of a 2-piece bonus for it. The 2 through 4-piece stats on it are pretty great though for PvE DPS, so I could see this being a nice set for players who are attempting content like Vet Maelstrom or Vet Vatashran Hollows for the first time, or trying for a no-death achievement somewhere. It gives a little leeway for taking incoming damage while still having some nice bonuses on the 2, 3, and 4-piece stats. The shield size does also increase with the Bastion CP up to 14,104, so you can see it's pretty dang strong. Could even combine it with Ice Heart to pretty much double your health and damage shields. Seems like a really nice set for learning content and playing a little safer. And then finally for the Overland sets, we have Kin Marcher's Cruelty. This is a heavy set. It adds max health, stamina recovery, armor, and then when you deal direct damage, you apply one of 5 random major debuffs to enemies within 8 meters of you for 18 seconds. This effect can occur once every 8 seconds and only if an enemy is in range. Eligible debuffs are Major Breach, Major Cowardice, Major Defile, Major Maim, and Major Vulnerability. So this is another reverse set of something that already exists. This time this is the reverse of Daedric Trickery. So instead of gaining random major buffs, you dish out random major debuffs. This set is really interesting as it applies the debuffs in a fairly good size AoE and they last for 18 seconds, which is a really long time for the debuffs listed here. The downside is you have no control over which debuffs are going out. So for PvE, the Cowardice is pretty good as it would reduce the weapon and spell damage of the enemy by 430. Maim is really good to reduce the enemy's damage by 10%, and Major Vulnerability is great as it increases the enemy's damage taken by 10%. Major Breach and Major Defile will be the 2 that are pretty much dud rolls in PvE, as Breach is easily kept up at 100% already and almost no PvE enemies heal. Pretty cool set, definitely one of the most interesting out of all the new ones I think. Be interesting to see if this could be a nice option for groups that are a little light on the Necromancers, since Major Vulnerability was previously a debuff only available through their Colossus ultimate. You do only have a 1 in 5 chance of rolling it with this set though, so not really a reliable solution for missing Necros overall. I think it is a pretty cool set though. Alright, now we'll move on to the Mythics. First is the Markin Ring of Majesty. Gain 100 weapon and spell damage and 1157 armor for each 3 set bonus active on the wearer. So the developer comment says, this set's effect counts for any 3 or 5 piece set in which you are wearing a minimum of 3 of the pieces. For example, wearing 3 pieces of agility counts as 1 3-set bonus on the wearer. Wearing 3 pieces of Hunding's Rage also counts as 1 3-set bonus on the wearer, as would wearing 5 pieces of Hunding's Rage. So for most common setups, you'll be getting 200 weapon and spell damage and 2314 armor from this, which is still pretty nice for a 1-piece. It is a little better than a 1-piece monster set just on the damage alone, but you also get the extra tankiness. It isn't as much damage as something like the Harpooner's Waiting Kilt, and I think the Death Dealer's Ring is still a little more appealing when you can sit at max stacks for a while, but still pretty nice stats here. And there are ways to increase that bonus to 300 weapon and spell damage and 3471 armor. Just as an example, if you had something like Burning Spellwave on the back bar, Acuity on the front bar, a 3-piece Sororia for the Minor Slayer bonus, then you'd still have 1 slot left over for the Markin's Ring. I'm not saying this is like a best in slot build or anything, though it does seem like it would be fairly decent for trash pools, but just wanted to show the example of how something like this could be put together. You could also front bar a 3-piece set like Willpower or Agility, giving you room for a 5-piece set on the body as well. Overall, I think this Mythic will be best suited if it happens to fit into a build that you're already using, rather than necessarily trying to make a build for a situation to suit this Mythic. Pretty cool though. I'm sure there are some pretty great combos that people will come up with to get all 3 of those stacks, but like I said, even with just 2 stacks, the stats are pretty decent. Like most other items, it will just come down to the situation you want to use it for. Next up is Balharza's Band. This one increases your light attack damage by 1185, and then the second thing it does is when you deal damage with consecutive melee light attacks, gain a stack of Balharza's Temper for 10 seconds up to 5 stacks max. At 5 stacks, consume the Temper, and after a 1-second delay, deal 8442 physical damage to enemies in a line and stun them for 3 seconds. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds and scales off the higher of your weapon and spell damage. So they did already note that the light attack bonus is going to be reduced down to 900, down from 1185. Some people were thinking this might be worth slotting in some situations just for the light attack bonus alone, but I don't know, with it only being 900 now, if it's going to be worth it. The big issue with this set for most builds is that it requires consecutive light attacks rather than allowing light attacks that are weaved between abilities to count for that secondary part there. So for most traditional rotations, outside of the flat light attack damage boost, the secondary part of this set is useless. This will be an interesting option for some niche setups though. The main one I think being for those werewolf builds that are spamming light attacks, maybe combined with the Blood Moon set that boosts your light attack speed and damage. It does require melee light attacks as well, so werewolves would qualify here, but outside of that, you'd need to be using some kind of melee weapon for it to work. The only other scenario I really see it being used is in some kind of off-meta playstyle where people just want to spam light attacks, more like a hack and slash kind of game. There are definitely people you run across in dungeons and battlegrounds that do play the game like this, though it's usually a sign of being inexperienced and not just that it's their preferred playstyle. However, if someone did want to play the game more like that, this may be an okay option. I don't really mind them introducing stuff for more outside of the box kind of play styles, as there are already so many sets in the game anyways. So it's okay if not all sets fit into the way that I play, and you know, this is just one that I probably won't end up using. And then for the final mythic that they are introducing, we have the Spalder of Ruin. Activating Crouch toggles on and off a 12-meter aura of pride. Up to 6 allies in the aura gain 260 weapon and spell damage. Reduce your health, magicka, and stamina recovery by 70 for every group member benefiting from your aura of pride. So this is a really nice group buff, especially for just a one-piece bonus. However, you will be giving up 420 of each recovery if you are buffing the maximum of 6 people with this set, so definitely a steep cost. However, I think experienced players will be able to tweak their setups to offset this. Definitely best on support, but in a pinch you could have a DPS wear it, preferably one that has great sustain already, and maybe they could swap to recovery food to offset the negative effect. Not ideal, I'm not saying do it that way, but if no one in the group is running it, better that than to not have the buff at all. But for sure try to put it on a healer or a tank first, and that is more in line with the way it was designed. The AoE on it is a pretty nice size too, so you don't have to worry about squeezing everyone into a really small spot. I see this definitely becoming a signature set for 12-person trial compositions and probably dungeon groups too. Alright, that's going to do it for this video. Let me know what you think about the new sets. I think there's some interesting stuff here, but I'm personally more excited for the changes to the existing sets, which, as I mentioned earlier, I will do a video over after the week 3 patch notes. I want to give a big thanks to my current Patreon supporters. If you'd like to see how you can help support the channel through Patreon, I'll have a link in the description below. And a special thanks to Nicholas, Simon, Privy League Guild on PlayStation's EU server, Cougar is Bay in the Cougar City Guild, Stridig, the Order of War Guild, Iffy, and my wonderful wife. Thank you so much for stopping by. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.